The irony wasn't lost on me. After spending 5 years researching breakthrough treatments for aggressive cancers, I was now sitting in a doctor's office, being told I had stage 3 lymphoma. "We need to start treatment immediately, Dr. Chin," my oncologist said, her voice gentle but firm. "The next few months will be crucial." I nodded, my mind already racing through calculations and research protocols. My work at Meridian Pharmaceuticals had been leading to something big, a new treatment approach that could revolutionize cancer therapy. I was close to a breakthrough, I could feel it. The next morning, I walked into Meridian's research facility like any other day. My team was already there, running tests and analyzing data. They didn't know about my diagnosis yet. Nobody did, except my husband Mike. Dr. Chin. Sarah, my research assistant, rushed over with excitement. "The latest trial results are incredible. The modified compound is showing an 87% success rate in the lab mice." I reviewed the data, my hands trembling slightly. This was it, the breakthrough we'd been working toward. The treatment protocol I'd designed was working better than we dared hope. But something felt off. There were too many side glances from senior management, too many whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Later that afternoon, my boss, James Morrison, called me into his office. He was sitting behind his massive desk, looking every bit the corporate shark in his expensive suit. "Ah, Dr. Chen," he said, not bothering to look up from his computer. "Please, sit down." I sat, noticing the HR representative lurking in the corner. My stomach dropped. "We've been reviewing the department's performance," James began, his voice oddly cheerful, "and we've decided to make some changes." "Changes?" I asked, though I already knew what was coming. He slid a folder across the desk. "Your services are no longer required at Meridian Pharmaceuticals." I stared at the termination papers, my mind racing. "You're firing me? Now, when we're on the verge of a breakthrough?" "Ah yes, the research," James smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "All your work belongs to Meridian, of course. As per your contract, any discoveries or developments made during your employment are company property." The room seemed to spin. They were taking everything, my job, my research, my chance at the very treatment that might save my life. "Why?" I managed to ask. "Budget cuts," he shrugged, but I saw the gleam in his eyes. "Though between us, your recent distraction hasn't gone unnoticed. All those doctor's appointments, leaving early, looking tired." He knew. Somehow, he found out about my diagnosis. "You're firing me because I have cancer?" "Of course not," he said smoothly. "That would be illegal. We're simply restructuring. You have until the end of the day to clear out your office. Security will escort you." I walked out of his office in a daze, but my mind was already working. What James didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd made the real breakthrough 3 months ago. Everything since then had been carefully orchestrated misdirection. You see, I'd learned early in my career that the pharmaceutical industry could be ruthless. I'd watched other researchers lose their life's work to corporate theft and contractual fine print. So I developed a habit of keeping my most important discoveries separate from my official research. The treatment protocol in the company records was promising, yes, but it wasn't the real breakthrough. That was hidden away, encrypted and buried where no one would think to look. Back in my office, I began packing while security watched. Pictures of my family, degrees from MIT and Stanford, 5 years of my life reduced to a cardboard box. But as I packed, I was also sending a carefully coded email to Sarah. "Follow Protocol 0, it read, she would understand." Protocol 0 was something I'd established when I first hired Sarah. A contingency plan for exactly this type of situation. While I cleared out my office, she would be quietly backing up certain files, removing specific notes from the system, and preparing for what came next. That evening, I sat in my home office, surrounded by research notes only I could fully understand. My official work computer was company property, wiped clean as required. But my real work, my true breakthrough, was safe. I opened my personal laptop and began to type, "Patent application for novel cancer treatment protocol." James thought he'd won, thought he'd stolen my life's work just when I needed it most. But he was about to learn a valuable lesson about underestimating desperate people, especially desperate people with PGs and backup plans. The next 3 months were a blur of chemotherapy sessions and patent applications. While my body fought the cancer, my mind stayed focused on protecting my research. Sarah had executed Protocol Zero perfectly. Key components of my breakthrough were now safely documented and dated prior to my termination. I watched from afar as Meridian struggled with the research they'd stolen. Their press releases boasted about promising developments, but I could read between the lines. Without the critical pieces I'd kept hidden, they were stuck. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. Dr. Chen. The voice belonged to Diana Roberts, head of research at Genesis Biotech, Meridian's biggest competitor. We've reviewed your patent application. Would you be interested in meeting to discuss a potential collaboration? 1 week later, I sat in Genesis's boardroom, my patent documentation spread across the table. I'd lost weight from the chemo, but I deliberately scheduled this meeting for a good week in my treatment cycle. I needed to be sharp. This is remarkable, Diana said, reviewing my research. And you can prove this was developed prior to your termination from Meridian. I nodded, pulling out more documents. Everything is dated and authenticated. Additionally, I have evidence that Meridian terminated me after learning of my cancer diagnosis, which, as you noted, is illegal. They're already promoting their version of this research, Diana frowned. Their incomplete version, I corrected. They have maybe 60% of the protocol. Without the key components I've patented, their treatment will never work effectively. The meeting lasted hours. By the end, we had an agreement. Genesis would fund the completion of my research, with me leading the project. The salary they offered was triple what I'd made at Meridian. But the best part came 2 weeks later. I was in my new lab at Genesis when Sarah texted me, "Turn on Channel 7 now." The news headline made me smile. Meridian Pharmaceuticals stock plummets amid patent infringement allegations. James Morrison's face filled the screen as reporters shouted questions. Mr. Morrison, how do you respond to allegations that Meridian stole research from a terminated employee? Is it true she was fired after being diagnosed with cancer? The company's stock dropped 40% that day. Their investors were panicking, their board was calling for investigations, and James Morrison's perfect world was crumbling. That evening he called me. "Let's be reasonable," he said, his smooth confidence replaced by desperate negotiation. "We can work something out." "Like you worked something out when you fired me?" I asked calmly. "When you tried to steal my research right after my cancer diagnosis." "I can get you your job back," he'd offered. "Better salary, full benefits, complete control of your research team." "No thank you," I replied. "I'm happy at Genesis. By the way, how's the research going? Having trouble making it work?" His silence was answer enough. 6 months later, I sat in my oncologist's office, receiving very different news from my first visit. "The cancer is in remission," she said, smiling. "The treatment protocol you developed, the one Genesis is now producing, it worked perfectly." I touched the port in my chest where I'd received my own medicine. The treatment I developed, hidden and protected. The treatment that was now helping thousands of other cancer patients. Meridian eventually settled our patent dispute out of court. The settlement was substantial, but more importantly, it came with a public admission of wrongdoing. James Morrison was forced to resign. Yesterday, I received a letter from a cancer patient who'd received my treatment protocol. "Thank you for not giving up," she wrote. "Thank you for fighting, both the cancer and the people who tried to stop you." I placed her letter in my office, next to my framed patent documentation. Sarah, now my research director at Genesis, had helped me create a display of our journey. The termination notice from Meridian, the patent applications, the successful trial results, and finally, my own clean bill of health. This morning, I passed James Morrison on the street. He's working at a much smaller pharmaceutical company now, his reputation in tatters. He avoided my eyes, hurrying past like he'd seen a ghost. In a way, he had. I was supposed to be a cautionary tale, the researcher who lost everything to cancer and corporate greed. Instead, I became something else. Proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't just surviving, but thriving. My team at Genesis is now working on new treatment protocols. We recently hired a young researcher who'd been wrongfully terminated from another company. I'm teaching her about Protocol Zero, how to protect herself and her work. Because in this industry, you never know when you'll need a backup plan. Sarah stopped by my office late last night as I was reviewing new research data. "Do you ever regret not just giving Meridian everything?" she asked. "Might have been easier." I showed her the latest patient recovery statistics. Thousands of people now receiving successful treatment through the protocol we protected. The easy path isn't always the right one, I said. Sometimes you have to fight, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. She nodded, understanding. We both knew that somewhere, in a secure location, Protocol Zero was already in place for our new research. Just in case. Because the best scientists know, always keep your breakthroughs close and your backup plans closer.